Hello fellow sim racers, and welcome to another episode of Talking Sims. Today I'm joined by Ricardo, who you probably better know as Random Callsign. Now, we recorded this podcast on Thursday evening, before the excellent SRO and IndyCar races that happened over the weekend, so some of the comments may sound a little bit weird out of context, but just bear in mind that it was before those two events. Also, there's some hat-related continuity issues that are going to crop up for those of you that are watching on the video, but if you're listening on the podcast, just, forget I said anything. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today, Ricardo. How are you doing, man?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks, but we're all getting by. So I guess let's just start off by doing the standard first question. And can you just let the viewers know a little bit about yourself and how you got into sim racing? I guess most of them probably already know, but tell the story again, just for the sake of it.
Just for the sake of it. Okay, my name is Ricardo. I'm Portuguese. I started sim racing, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago. I'm not sure if you can say sim racing is part of like Gran Turismo 5. That's how I came into driving around in tracks and stuff. Then I moved to a Portuguese league called Portuguese group, sim racing group called PT Sims. I've been there for a year or so, and then I started doing videos with, races and stuff, and everything developed from there. It's just what started very small, then it started to become gradually bigger. That's basically what everybody else does in sim racing.
So was there a point where the YouTube channel became a bigger focus of your sim racing during all of that?
I can say around 2017, 2018, it's when I started to put more time into it. So I used to do a lot of races in sim racing system. Started covering around 2017 or so with a weekly series. Then races that I've had, online racing and other small races that I've had in iRacing and stuff like that.
Yeah, YouTube has a way of gradually consuming everything, I've found.
Yes, but it always gets bigger. You always want to do something different or something better, and when a video that is 5 minutes takes you 5 hours to edit.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. It just gets depressing.
No.
So, right, the main topic of today's show is, I guess, the recent sim racing events that have popped up as a response to the global motorsport shutdown. And we're going to talk about what impact they might have on sim racing as a whole. So I guess we just jump into the heart of the matter. And what do you think so far of the events you've seen over the last couple of weeks?
I have mixed feelings. It's hard to discern because sim racing went to a spotlight that wasn't really prepared. People look at sim racing as some sort of escape valve, maybe for nerds that can't be drivers, or people that spend way too much time and money in video games or something like that. And then all of a sudden, because there's no racing at all, the only racing is sim racing. What ended up happening is that you had all of this pressure, all of those eyes, people that wanted to see racing, and there's this sim racing events, and the organizers themselves didn't seem to be totally prepared for a new viewership. Some of them did it better. Some of them did it worse. And well, it's a stepping stone into something bigger, hopefully in the future. I wasn't very impressed in some of them. For example, on Formula 1 2019 game that happened, for example, with Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, and all of that. Those guys, I think, no, Max wasn't there. It kind of felt more like an entertaining thing other than racing itself.
Yeah, you're talking about the official F1 esports one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 100% agree on that. Sorry to cut you off there, but there were also the Veloce eSport F1 2019 ones,
yes,
which I think were a bit probably closer to sensible than sadly the official F1 esports one. I share the same view as you, that it was aiming for entertainment value, and that felt to me at least like a real missed opportunity, because if you've watched any of the F1 esports events particularly over the last season, where I think they've really got it together, the driving standards are amazing, the racing's been really good, the production's super slick. It's this really great advert for what sim racing can do. and they were putting it out on the main Formula One channel, and it was going out on Sky Sports, it was going out everywhere. And what you got was this kind of race which had a couple of F1 guys, a couple of reserve drivers, an old driver or two, and then it was filled up with journalists and, you know, and some influencers and stuff. And yeah, not to knock the influencers and journalists that were there. I'm sure, you know, they all earned a place one way or another. But when you've got that one big grab for the branch, you know, the big grab at the huge F1 audience, I think you need to have esports guys there, and you need to have the real drivers.
People will look at it coming from outside. Once again, they look at it. Okay, this is Formula One. It's being pushed by Formula One, and they're doing this for the jokes. So therefore, sim racing, or at least this game and this specific organization, is for jokes. And then you have, like you say, the Velocious, where they have very high standards, and they don't have the same eyes where they probably should have been. You know, the guys racing on, maybe with some of the Formula One drivers, so they could do a little bit of mix and matching, but with the same type of racing, or you know what you can do in Formula One 2019. So people could see that, you know, these guys race really well, race really fast. On the other hand, on Redline Motorsports, which you were a host, and which I got Audi R8 up my face because somebody lost control, the race was really good.
It was. I really enjoyed commentating on that.
It was intense. It was well covered, and the racing standards were pretty nice for you know the top 10 were so close, and they fought for 45 minutes.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like Jardier in the middle of that pack, just every single driver out there, like 2/10 behind the guy in front, setting identical lap times. It was crazy how competitive it was at the front, and it was a really tense race to watch, and it was great. I think there was some other good stuff that came out over the last couple of weekends that sort of span this sort of bridge between the entertainment and the really serious stuff. I don't know if you caught any of the IMSA broadcast from Sebring.
I haven't, but the one that I've heard that was good, not sure, I can't say it was good, it was NASCAR.
Yeah, the NASCAR one as well.
I did rip into NASCAR in my previous video. Yeah. I did talk about it, but I think they got the plot better this time, and they had really good viewership.
Like 1 million views nearly, I think it was, over all in. It's which, I mean, it makes sense to me. iRacing's made huge inroads into the NASCAR crowd, and I think it all came together at a time that was right for it to be pushed. The production was perfect, the race was great, everyone got it, everyone got behind it. And that leads me perfectly on to the next question, and I think you touched upon this a little bit actually, is that one of my main takeaways was the sort of different approaches for these various racing sims led me to believe that maybe the sim racing industry doesn't really know exactly what it wants to achieve in the esports arena, and maybe wasn't just all that well prepared to be thrust into the spotlight.
I think that's the case, but I don't always think that it's about what the sim racing esports guy wants, because the sim racing esports community or industry, you want to call it, they want to do esports. So it has to be competitive. It's the other way around. It's the top up that sometimes doesn't get what the consumer wants, or what sim racing is about, or how to bridge the gap. That's the main issue that I see, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity to plug the video you released earlier today, where you talk about some of these issues, particularly that market in terms of viewership for esports is much lower than the sort of perception that it is, and certainly lower than the value that some of these brands are pouring into it. And this is actually one of my my pet subjects. We were talking just before the call, and one of the things that I'm really keen to make clear, having worked on a few esports events now, is that I don't think we as a sim racing community, or we as esports producers, or whoever the group is, have paid enough attention to the audience. There's this brand new product. It's like the iPhone. When the iPhone came out, there was no market for the iPhone. Apple had to create that market. Maybe the iPhone's
I think
a bad
it's more
example.
like the Newton.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
it's more like the Newton.
Yeah, the iPhone was
At this point, it's sim racing is the Newton, so it has all the format of form factor, or more or less the form factor, but it doesn't have neither the markets nor the sleekness to give it to a new audience.
Yeah, damn it! I hate that you got that, but you've nailed exactly what that is right there. But yeah, the thing is, we as if I put my sort of esports hat on, one of the things I've been trying to reiterate to people I've been working with is that we have to create the market. There's not a ready-made audience for racing esports. As you said in your video, and I think Austin said in the video that you're referencing, sim racers don't watch racing esports. Some do, and more are switching on, but it's happening slowly. That's a gradual creep. Real motorsport fans, certainly prior to a couple of weekends ago, weren't really tuning in for racing esports. So who the hell is watching it? So we've got to build that market as well as the product and get those two things to come together and combine. And that's just not been happening up until this stage, which is why I think the last couple of weeks have been really interesting. Reading comments on Twitter and on the streams from people that have come across these streams for the first time, often from the motorsport community, because they're just lost and they don't know what to do with their Sunday afternoon. So, they've watched these alternative races. And yeah, I mean, there's some positivity. There is definitely positivity there. Some people have been captured and said, hey, maybe this e-racing stuff's great. But there's also a huge amount of, why the hell am I watching some guys play PlayStation? And that sentiment is decades old, isn't it? That's what certainly what my parents were saying.
There's a generation gap. There's what I call the Jimmy Kimmel mentality. Why would I watch somebody play a video game when I can play them myself? But those are the same people that watch Arsenal on TV. They can also go to a field and kick some balls. It's the same thing. Well, you have to build this slowly. It can't be pushed. If it's pushed in towards the eyes of a lot of people, they won't get it. So it needs to ferment a little bit, like a good wine or a good beer. It takes a while.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. But I mean, there's also some work that could be done by the esports community to communicate the story better. One of the things I'm always trying to push is the fact that we've got to be. No one cares who the guy that wins the race is. Before Rudy Van Buren was world's fastest gamer, or Kamil Franchek won SRO Esports Championship, no one knew who they were. And even now that they don't. Even now, it's a really limited community of people who know those people are. So even the stories of the champions are difficult to tell. So one of them gets a McLaren simulator contract. So this isn't. There's a lot of story to tell there, but I'm not sure it's necessarily been done all that well. And I think, again, naturally the stories behind motorsports are more interesting. I'm from this town and I started in karting, and then I went to this, and then I went to that, and then I got probably a shot at a GT car or something like that. There's always this gradual stepping up. Started from grassroots. I probably had a very wealthy father or a very wealthy mother. That's another story. Started from grassroots and went all the way into the seat of GT3 or LMP1 or whatever. It's a bit more interesting than
in the case, I was in my room, I had a PlayStation.
Yeah.
No, it's more interesting than I was in my room. True. I had nothing better to do for the weekend, so I went to do some laps in a PlayStation. It doesn't work like that. So the stories have to be built in a different way, and in the stories that need to be told are the ones we had, for example, in Gran Turismo with Michele Izal and Igor Fraga.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
I know it's a lot of drama, but it's not just the drama that sells. It's people want to see the competitiveness of sim racers. And you can think whatever about the incident itself, but that thing was like a catalyst. Now I'm going to watch that race. I didn't watch the previous race, but sure as hell I did watch the next one,
Yeah, well, that was a big story.
You have to make them interested in it.
That was a big story. I think that happened It happened on one of the SRO weekends because I remember talking to David Perel about that. We were having a conversation about it, and he said, "Oh, did you see what happened between?" And he talked about
Yeah,
that for like
it was just
45
before
minutes.
the Sim Racing
Sim Racing
Expo.
Expo, wasn't it? It wasn't Nürburgring.
Just
Yeah.
before it.
Yeah, and he got onto the subject and he was just talking about this for 45 minutes. And okay, yeah, he's a really enthusiastic guy and he loves to talk about racecraft stuff, but he loved that, and it's those kind of stories that are worth $1 million in our arena, and we're doing a bad job. I think of telling them at the moment. Not everyone. Gran Turismo is doing a great job of doing
credit
it.
due, and they knew how to sell it.
Oh yeah.
You had the thing with Jimmy Broadbent going around giving with the microphone. So what do you think about this? Oh, I think it was very bad. totally off. Whatever. I didn't like it. And the other one, I think it was okay. Then you also have the discussion about the incident itself. So you sell the story, you sell the moment, and you sell the interest. And viewers are looking into it. Okay, these guys are really competitive. And then the next race, what do they see? They see like a kick-ass race, like it's pretty much all the time in GT Sports with those guys. They drive really fast. They are really competitive. There's always a lot of guys in the middle of the pack that are trying to get into fourth or fifth place to get into the next stage. So it just makes it so more interesting. The coverage is really on the spot. It's the closest thing to Formula One we have in sim racing. But not everything that we can do in sim racing can be like that, because those moments, that old coverage costs a lot of money. And money is scarce in sim racing. So while you don't need the coverage itself like that, you can still sell stories in the same way, presenting who is this driver. You don't present it as a guy that is 15 or 20 years old driving in a PlayStation. You don't need to do that. But he's a driver. He is really fast, always competitive. He had this moment with this guy from another country or whatever, and you can build these stories, and people are drawn to these stories.
Yeah, I mean, what it can't all be Prost versus Senna, but there's a lot more richness.
But it's part of it.
Yeah, there's a lot more richness to that period of Formula One than just the two big names clashing. So I'm just going to go slightly off script for a moment. I've started to introduce a couple of just like little fun questions midway through these recordings, just to make sure we keep things light. So I apologize for these, but I'm gonna pick two of the more fun ones. So which sim racing personality would you least like to be stuck in a lift with?
Least likely to be stuck in a lift with?
Yeah, who would you really hate to be stuck in an elevator with?
Probably Gamer Muscle. No, he's a really nice guy. But I'm gonna say Gamer Muscle because he's always talking about tea.
He's always talking.
Always banging.
He's just always talking
about tea.
He'd be commentating on the lift.
Yes, exactly. Doing Gordon Murray impressions.
Yeah.
And talking about tea.
All right, okay, that's a great answer. So the other one is, if you know the classic Simpsons episode, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Homer he's tasked to design a car for the average American. And
I remember.
Yeah, he comes up with a car called the Homer. So if you were to design a car for the average sim racer, what would it include?
Probably a cockpit inside on the passenger seat.
So a car within a car, a pretend car within a real car.
Exactly.
And would it be more successful than the Homer? That's the real question.
Probably not.
Cool. Well, that's the first two times I've done those two questions, and I think they've been a roaring success. So I'm gonna ambush someone else with them later. That's great. So okay, back to the topic. Thanks for being a good sport about them. I really don't want to go back to the serious questions now. So right, based on what we've seen from these events so far, what impact do you think they will have, or the renewed interest, or any new fans we've generated from these events will have on the sim racing community?
I think overall it's been a good impact. It has put a lot on ice, and also you have a lot of drivers, sim racers talking about it. So I think as because of the interests that we are having from non-regular sim racing viewers, I think there will be more interested in producing these events at a better level. It doesn't. I don't want to say better level in terms of money, but in terms of attention. I'm going to give you an example that failed, but it's something that it's going to start to improve. In Portugal, they had the virtual race of Portugal, which had also very well-known drivers, including an ex-Formula One driver and ex-TCR driver. I'm not sure if it drives, which is Tiago Monteiro. He had Felix da Costa, which was a Red Bull driver, and he drives Formula E.
Yep. Yeah.
I think, not sure for Red Bull. The virtual race of Portugal was transmitted in what is the Portuguese equivalent of ESPN, but on the online version on a YouTube. A lot of issues. It was the first time they tried it. A lot of technical issues. They tried R Factor 2. They had a problem with R Factor 2. The format wasn't quite okay, and the race only had 20 minutes. You had the whole shebang of the practice that nobody wants to watch, and then you had to qualify. They did the quick laps and whatever, and then 20 minutes racing. So they failed at pretty much of everything, but it garners the interest. But for the next time, they will see it. Okay, if we want to continue, where did we fail? Where can we improve? This is what it matters.
Yeah, I think
they don't need to put any more money into it. They can continue to do the same thing, talk with the same guys, the Portuguese guys that do the commentary, probably sim racer commentary guys. And where did it fail? Where can we improve? That's basically what is needed.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of really, I don't know if they're important points, but there are points I'm really passionate about. First of which is that there's some really weird packaging that sometimes goes on in sim racing events where you mentioned it's a 20-minute race after everyone sat through practice and qualifying and things like that.
Which is probably twice or three times as long as the race.
We keep doing that as a community, and I don't know why it is, because no one's. I think I do. The people putting on some of these events, and it is only some of them. Don't get mad at me if you're one of the people I've worked with and I'm looking at you. You're not thinking, as an industry, we're not thinking about the audience, which is mental. It's totally stupid, because the only thing that matters when the stream's going out is the audience. It doesn't really matter the format of the on-site event. It doesn't matter what the sponsor relationship wanted here and there and that. I just think it start with the audience.
I understand why they do this. They do it from a perspective of a sim racer and not from a perspective of as a broadcaster. And that happens to me as well. For example, I go to my cockpit and let's say I want to do an iRacing stream. I stream the practice, I stream the qualify, I stream the race. In the relationship that I'm having at that moment with my viewership, it makes sense because we're there for jokes, probably have a good race, but we're there for the stream itself. But from a broadcasting perspective, it's totally different. You're not selling the streamer, you're selling the race. So it has to change the packaging.
Okay, so if you were planning a sim racing event of your own, maybe with some crossover with real life drivers, and you have a complete blank sheet of paper, what does that event look like for you?
That's a difficult question. I know it's very easy to be on the criticizing end without giving any specific solutions, but you still have to give some. We need to look at it at what went well. So you had great races, for example, on RLM or NASCAR, as you said. You pick that is more or less the format you want. Problems they had aside, problems in RLM we had aside, it's more or less what you want from an event. But having a blank check would be presenting at least some of the drivers, if there's any championship standing or whatever. Try to get a couple of real life drivers, because we're not talking about just a situation that we are at the moment where you can have a NASCAR doing a NASCAR race with 5 or 6 or 10 real life drivers, but try to get a couple of drivers so you can bridge that gap and people can put your eyes on and try to sell the stream. You need to get good good commentators. You have good commentators in sim racing. In reality, you have more than enough good commentators, and some of them are better than the ones in Sky Sports, in my opinion.
Oh, wait, are we doing the bit where I take the piss out of Crofty? Okay, no, that's good. Get rid of him. March him into the sea. I'm done.
Yes.
No, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of talent in the sim racing and motorsport industry to find some good synergies there. On that note, though, how maybe would you pair up a real life commentator with some good real life experience and someone from the sim community? Because you've got to communicate that experience of what sim racing is, and maybe that was something that was a little bit. I didn't watch all of the IMSA broadcast, but there were a few little bits missing from the Radio Le Mans commentary that didn't quite push the sim racing angle in the way that a sim racer would have. I know they've got some experience of Forza and stuff like that, so they're coming from a good place, and it was all done really genuinely. But just if you'd had Jimmy in the other seat or Gamer Muscle or whoever, maybe not Gamer Muscle, but
he does a really great Warren Murray impersonation.
I think he's a great commentator. I think
as well. I've told him so. He should try it. You should at least try it. It's the beginning is always try it. You never know if you're going to fail or you're going to succeed.
No, it's very true. I don't know who you'd have in the other seat, but I think it's important to have both sides. And I think they tried to touch on that in the coverage that the race did of their event, where they had, I can't remember who the commentary team was. It Jack Nicholls, Jolyon Palmer, and it was Rene Butler, wasn't it, from the R Factor team? But I don't think that they weren't really handing over to Rene as much as I'd like for that sort of thing. But that's
the real life commentators. They also need to be clued up about what is sim racing, because in one aspect that I saw in the virtual race of Portugal, the guys they were having coverage of real life races, and they always one of them was always talking about sim races as the nerds of racing or nerds of computer nerds or whatever. He was always cracking that joke within the Portuguese within the Portuguese context of the word nerd, which is the word cromo. It kind of works out, but it still doesn't sell that very well for people that are outside of that niche, because they might not get the in joke. It's totally fine for we are within us or within the context if there's a broader context, but in that specific case, saying that word over and over again, it doesn't sell it quite right, in my opinion.
No, I must admit, I've seen events in the past where we've had real world commentators commenting on sim racing events, and it hasn't been necessarily done with the greatest of care, and you can tell that they're not as perhaps invested in it as they would be passionate, certainly, if it were a real life race. But Jack Nicholls, to his credit, started out as I think as an R Factor 2 commentator, so it's nice for that to sort of go full circle a bit. But let's move on. I think you answered that really nicely. So it's another tough question next, and this is the one you said you didn't like, so let's have fun with it. I think we've all been caught off guard by the global situation. How can the sim racing community, and particularly the events production community, the esports community, be better prepared in future to deal with a situation where it's sort of unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight? Just a small one. Can you just solve all of the world's problems, please, just in one?
Yes. First of all, you need a pandemic response unit. Don't dissolve it, just because you're going to save some money. There is no really good way to prepare to a cataclysm event, if I'm using this word, such a big event. There's really no way. You put into a big paradigm shift of an event, and the best thing you can do is just learn from the experience. Now, for next time, I think it's all about format and all about the stories.
Yeah, I think we've actually
want,
covered a lot of it. I think the answers earlier on are actually pretty much nailing it. I wasn't expecting you to go into such detail in the early questions. That's the problem there. But no, I agree very much that, I mean, this is a completely unprecedented situation. And, you know, I do genuinely feel like perhaps as a community, we weren't quite ready to have that exposure. Over the last few years, it's looked very much like, hey, this racing esports thing's getting more and more money put into it. It's getting more and more exposure. Yeah, there are issues with the audience, and there are formatting issues, and there are all sorts of these other things, but they're slowly being chipped away at. But I don't think anyone sort of thought going into this season that, hey, we're all going to be talking about, you know, the F1 Bahrain Grand Prix being played on F1 2019 rather than out on the real circuit. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say that I think we all thought we had more time.
Yes. If I had to ask for anything, it's for big organizations to look at sim racing, to give a chance to sim racing, but not throw it too much out there. Give some space in their online pages. Maybe use the YouTube or Twitch accounts if they have to do the streaming, so we can put like more eyes. Because at the end of the day, this doesn't work as much as regular TV, because the consumers of regular TV, especially on racing, are on the older age. If we look at our demographics as a YouTuber, and you probably look at the same demographics that I'm seeing, it pretty much tops out at 45. You know, there's older than 45, of course, but it's very little.
Yeah, 25. Pretty much everybody. 25 to 35 is that's the peak age range.
The lion's share.
Yeah. And that's not surprising. We're the generation that grew up with video games, aren't we?
Exactly. So if you look at whoever buys ad space, or for whoever watches, is either late Xers, maybe mid Xers, and early late boomers. Now it's pretty much late boomers, except probably in America you'll still have the older boomers that watch it. So there's big generation gap, and this is not putting telling something that is wrong about generations, because each generation they were brought with, you know, a different type of culture and different type of access to information. For them, a computer is completely different thing than it was for me. And myself, I am one of the older millennials. And if I look at what the Generation Z is doing with the computers, I don't understand what they're doing. And I sound like an old man.
We're not supposed to understand what the kids are doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually look, and when any time I see a teenager, and I think, what the fuck are you wearing? Or what the fuck?
Exactly.
I smile. I actually think that's great, because, you know, I'm in my mid-30s now, and I'm supposed to not understand what the kids are doing. So that actually warms my heart.
In a less light way, that also means that there is this consumer difference. It's not just an attitude difference. If you look at this from a marketing standpoint, it's a different consumer. So if you push sim racing the same way that push NASCAR to the same person, they'll have a completely different reaction to it. I don't understand this. Please give me Dale. That's basically it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And if you look at some of the comments on, as I said, on the streams and Twitter, there's definitely a big core contingent of the, you know, why am I watching people playing video games thing. And I don't think that, I'm not sure that generation's ever going to get past it. But that being said, my dad, who is now 70, he's 71 years old in the summer, he's always been into flight sims, and he's just started watching people playing flight sims on YouTube. So he gets it. Not only this is flight sims, so it's, you know, you take off and then you watch someone not doing anything for 4 hours while the plane flies itself. So he's watching someone not doing anything. So he's managed to take it to an even more advanced level. So, he's not watching someone do aerobatics or, combat simulator. He's watching someone fly a 737 across Europe. And
that's still interesting. I like it. I also enjoy that. The approaches and all that. There's a lot of stuff into it. He's probably looking at other nuances than we are.
Of course, yeah. And, I just think it's interesting that, someone that was born, a few years after the end of the Second World War has taken to watching other people play video games on YouTube, essentially.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's cool. I was about to say before I brought out that anecdote that, maybe that generation's not really going to adapt to it, and we're going to have to wait for the demographic shift. But maybe that's a bit negative. Maybe I'm wrong.
It doesn't really need to be. They don't really need to adapt. If they want to watch it, they can watch it. Not we, but the organization. If they're trying to put from a top up perspective, they need to understand there are demographic differences. They can still try to sell it to them, but it needs to be from a different perspective, so that it also respectful to the guys that actually watch it and to the people that don't really get it. They might, do a click or two. Oh, I don't like this. That's fine. But if you push it in the same way that you push NASCAR or Formula One, they won't get it, and they just think it's disrespectful to them. And if I were in their situation, I would say pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, no, very true. It's not really a problem that needs solving, is it? There are plenty of people out there to form this audience. It doesn't have to be people that watch James Hunt win the 1976 World Championship, because they're going to be a lot harder to win over than someone that's native to it. And honestly, I think it's all growing quite organically. It's been a bit of a shock the last couple of weeks. I would like to say
it's a good shock, though.
It's a good shock, and I would like to say, from my perspective, I think the vast majority of the quickly thrown together esports events have been very enjoyable from my perspective. There's only really. I have to say the F1 esports one, I was disappointed by, just because it felt like a massive missed opportunity. But the rest I enjoyed on varying levels, for just generally quite a lot. I think they were well put together. I enjoyed the variety of people there, but I really did like the IMSA and the NASCAR events that were done with such.
I need to rewatch it. So you keep talking about the IMSA one. I'll have to watch it again.
It's an endurance race and it's Sebring, so prepare to be sat down for a while. But
well, I'm working tomorrow. Yeah. I just put it on a different screen.
Apparently not, by the sounds of things. But yeah, no, it's worth a watch. They did it really well. Especially given the short time prepared, and as did the race. They threw together their first event in like 2 days or something. So to get all of those real world drivers and the influencers and the esport drivers together, the driving was a bit messy. In fact, that's something we didn't really talk about, which is one of my big points. One of my big problems with a few of these events is that maybe with a bit more preparation time, some of the real world drivers
sim
might
racing
have taken
drives
it
differently.
The sim racing drivers were generally fine, I think, but
no. What I'm saying is sim racing drives differently than real life. So you need to prepare yourself.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got people like, Paul O'Neill, the touring car driver, jumping in a couple of hours beforehand, drives down to Silverstone, jumps in a simulator that's, at the race circuit, does a couple of hours practice and jumps in the event. Good on him for doing it. I just don't think that's a recipe for success.
It won't be competitive at all.
But he's just that kind of guy, that give it a try sort of guy. So that's great, and I think that's actually a nice positive way to start rounding things out. So maybe it would be a good time for, again, I think most of my audience almost certainly knows you, but if they don't, where can they find you online, and what sort of content have you got coming up in the future?
Okay, I have a channel called Random Callsign. You can find me on YouTube. I also have an Instagram if you want to see stupid stuff that sometimes is related to sim racing, sometimes it's not. In the future, my channel is more or less a sim racing variety, I like to call it, channel. So in the future, I have a few reviews coming up. One is not reviews, but Automobilista 2 first looks. I'll be doing a comparison between two wheels, more or less, and other random stuff. In the future, though, I'll be doing a Portuguese channel, sim racing related as well, but it will be less content every so often.
And a lot of my audience won't be able to understand it, I'm guessing. Presumably you mean Portuguese language.
You never know.
You never know. Oh, well, maybe we can all learn Portuguese in the meantime. We're all stuck inside. We've got Duolingo. It'll be fine. Anyway, man, thank you so much for joining me here today. I think we've had an interesting discussion. Hopefully we haven't upset everyone in the esports industry by
I hope I haven't upset anyone as well.
No, I think we've been fine. I think we'll be all right. I think they're going to be more upset about the comments about gamer muscle in a lift than they are about.
Oh yes, absolutely. You never want that gamer muscle on a lift.
Anyway, man, thank you so much for joining me. I think that is the perfect moment to end on. So I guess, guys, all that's left to say is thank you so much for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.